short mandala to request the teachings. Strand anointed with perfumes, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Guru Radhamand. Yantayami. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly by the merits of giving and so on. May I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly by the merits of giving and so forth. May I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. David, the Snowland Mountains and transmigratory beings who extensively clarified the path that unifies emptiness and compassion to the lotus in the hand, Lord Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech. May all your holy wishes be fulfilled.
아니 다단다 공부를 주기 시딩기 치디 제베이나
So
로버 따와진다 튼주당 이다 니다 녀월 개바다 개외 까매바다 타고도 라로르 깨당 렌신 고보니 세링하니 강도롱월니 개와 시기 미금 견제보 대다 당제 콤바니니 니니니 개와 노베 레도 베버른 저 시제다 고물로주기 아니 코로나게 답에 저거 참부 시고 여대비 개버질이야 아니 갈로 딘세체 아니 랍제든지 제요 봐 시딩세디 어디 나로라다 denjogi milu za chenpo yindan ji de shishuen ta denjo milu toba de ne za chenpo yina ne ta di ne chusu de man roba chola man roba ne dabu ja go dan de go de ya ne shu karel ja go re sidu gewan do belle do be bar jus ta ding an zo le ya 그런 labje 좀 만나 신 안조에 다가라 고고요 res.
So there's a verse from, to begin the teaching this morning, there's a verse from Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, which is, Nagarjuna passing on to a very close friend of his who is a king, passing on some advice to him about, how to precious, and this verse is about precious human rebirth, or these lines where it says, adopting distorted views, being born as an animal, a hungry ghost, or in the hell realms, existing where the teachings of the victorious ones are absent, being born as a barbarian in a remote region, or being mentally deficient and mute, and likewise being born as a long life deity. These are known as the 8 faulty states that lack leisure. Since you have found freedom by being separated from these states, exert yourself in order to bring an end to the cycle of birth. So obviously this verse talks about the precious human rebirth, which is endowed with the leisures, free from these 8 particular states, and then also a further 10 endowments. And what he's saying to us here is saying to his friend the king here is, how to take hold of this opportunity, how to not waste time and not waste this opportunity, and take hold of this opportunity. And what does he say that the most important thing to do is that, is in the last line where it says, exert yourself in order to bring an end to the cycle of rebirth. So this is Nagarjuna's advice to a very good friend of him who is a king. And in the letter to a friend, his text, a letter to a friend.
Okay. Yep. 어려웠어. 답 재정가 당아란주 당아란주 켈렌 투여지디 아니 아란주 따지 타고 딜유데베 따지기 미망부 시부지 유여바다 되네 심진 자가르다로서 왔다 탐지일 땐시 아니 아란주야 아란주 참 루베지그레 루베 가르에서는 대화대화 동해면 되어 지와 다이네 디게 된다라 아니 지기 탑시 제방 전달해대 달행 아란주 지루루루지 제제 최고 돌링세야데 단단 공부루루기 아니 개보대주 상부 개보리야 아까 남번나 신세제 달행계랑기 녀셔죠디 미르름 부치에디 아니 최딘지 지주 총어디 깨와 상부라다스 아니 깨와 노벨레도 아니 삼로 당규주 총어디 깨와 상부 시부르 디톨라마동 아스 답저 제바나시 아란조 임베 있는 양 깨와가마다 치마도 시부지 켈렌토나 마토네 심그 소리지 나로라다 달렌 딘디기 아니 지기 남샤 준도다 만다베 아니 삼로 깨야디 동행기 탐지기 땡 진행기 아니 아란주 르덴디 참보시에베나 르덴 가져 상보지 토바이나야 동의다 규르비 동의기 땡 진행디 임바데 얀 야타마 타쳐버 다디 르베 좁토르 다 딘디지 아니 저랑 지기 거할이 개발된 바이네 기우 모용베 지 잔이 야탐바 땡 켜원도 선배 강도 지도기 아니 아란주게 다 갑대지 저규이나 7월로 갑대 짜네 다 당체 사람 거죠 다 갑대 쳐야 개요 말에 다 개체쇼된 아란주 아니 동해 강계버 제외기 아니 동해라 다기리 책견스나도 동해 다도 송대니기 르덴들이 당보디 르덴디 하기 르덴레베이네레 아니 지기 빌리니르기 르덴레베이네레 아니 쪼쪼지기 르덴레 다 르덴 디다 페쟁아 고고민도 세지 르당 삼로지 리고 요레스 제 장가 디차네 잔다 단다 디나로리아 가사 호다兄弟제 가자 야와 참보 공부기 너 단다 가사 너도 예 말해 제가 저 참중지래 다 디나로리아 아니 디주송요래 귤라마 뭐야 귤라메 나로리아 아니 직주 마송지 동행기 자와디 가르에 시도 준비 겨와인스 아니 단다 nyomong zawa di karre se do sembe dangzin di yin si che du sun ro yo she di na chin che da nga ran zo ani sanje chumden de ge ani dongye shebar cha se ge she di ani nga ran ju gi tyaba du ji gi dongye gi dang nga ran ju yebe luden di dongye tamji gi ten chin ye jire se di nga zo da nyeba nye to ju se de be ke chen bu ji di chung bu yin na dongye ka zo ya ga ji she to bu yin na 능에 델레 탄도기 삼바디 인지게마서는 오토매틱 랑싱기 거의 뜰레 토여지 인도선배 아니 테마타도 아니 능에 델레 탈베 아니 탈야지 여러베 세디 깨자디 랑싱기 레이원에 봐.
So in terms of this in terms of the here in terms of this verses that are spoken to the king I've forgotten his name, Dewa Sambo. Deva Sambo, to who is the Nagarjuna gives his advice to, and here is talking about the precious human rebirth and saying to the king, "You've attained a precious human rebirth. You know this great opportunity that you have, this precious human rebirth. Now, contained within that are perhaps some, we have to think about what we can actually really sort of accept and sort of believe in fully believe in some ways. So, for instance, it talks about all the kind of sort of these sort of lands on the on sort of on the limits of this world system and various places of rebirth that perhaps some of which may be a little bit difficult for us to understand or fully accept, but putting those things aside, we can still see, for instance, what's visible and easily accessible to us is all kinds of different life forms, all the kind of different peoples and wild animals and different kinds of sentient life which are manifestly visible to us. And one thing we can be very clear about in terms of those things is that every single living being wishes happiness and doesn't wish to have suffering. And though they may employ many whole variety of methods in which to achieve the happiness which they desire, that is still the basis. And so here the Nagarjuna is saying to the king about you have great opportunity not only to have, to achieve to have a precious human rebirth and to have met the Dharma. So this is a tremendous opportunity or not, and so even if we don't, whether we sort of really can fully accept that or not, we need to sort of have a different start to think about the context of our lives in a different way. So, for instance, we need to start understanding that although we call this a precious human body, this physical support of our body, we need to understand that is also the basis or the support of all of our suffering. So whether that is a beautiful and very healthy physical support or not, it's still the basis of all of our suffering. So wherever we are born, we're not going to, wherever we're born in the future, we're not able to stop that process. We still have the problem of suffering wherever we're born, and of course, as this body is our physical support, is something so precious to us. We hold on to it so much as being mine. And this is true of whoever people are, whether they're the billionaires or wherever someone is born in the whole range of samsara, whether they're a billionaire or a long life god, or most all beings tend to have this sort of sense of this is this is a very strong sense of this my body, but being a basis for our support, and it's almost like we need to uh, be able to release that and to sort of relax about that and say, no, I really don't need this physical support. So in Maitreya's, one of the texts from Maitreya's, the five dharmas of Maitreya, the Uttara Tantra, the Sublime Continuum, there Maitreya, some verses in there, Maitreya expresses that the root of suffering is birth. continual rebirth, and the self-grasping is the root of the mental afflictions, which then help to cause the rebirth. So this he states this very clearly, and then understanding when we say the root of suffering is birth, we also so this points to the understanding when the Buddha says know the suffering in the first turning of the wheel. What he's talking about is knowing the all-pervasive suffering, and particularly so joining this up so that this body is a kind of basis. In that sense, this body is a basis for the all-pervasive conditioned suffering, and this is something we really need to get a strong sort of sense of, clearly ascertain that. Because then automatically, if we're able to do that, and on top of that, we'll have this natural sense of uh, that's the problem, that the sort of taking continual rebirth in these suffering, these bases which are the bases of the bodies which are a suffering basis of suffering. Then we'll have this automatically a sense built on that kind of context, a perspective that it should be possible to be able to be liberated from that kind of suffering by understanding that the root of the mental afflictions is the self-grasping, and therefore cutting the self-grasping. So this very important context where we see that birth itself is the root of all suffering.
Okay. 알았어. 다들이 진도 아니 겨와 된데던 도백이 쳐도 아니 알아서다 산지기 슝니 송베 아니 슈다 되니 좀 베나 라바르는 딕서리 라바 추림게 라바 랑아 라바 띵게징게 라바 라바 쉐르게 라바스 라바 추림게 라바 되기 아니 지기 르딘 랑주 르딘 상보지 디 지가서래다 양양도 톱마토나 양고 달린 직니 양 체들이야 된다 친구 좀 뭐로베이나 그 양내 양도 랑주다 컨티뉴스 디 내가 체마토베나 프로젝트 마서 친구로 보다 내 인도 잠베 아니 라바 추름게 라바디 시루송구르스 대니 라바 띵이 징기 라바디기 셈디 장행 땅송베이나 아니 미루르부지 토바디 아니 아주 된여바지 체마토도 잠베 아니 냐바르도 라바 띵이 징기 라바다 셈 템보르네야게 아니 탑람 카레리네 라보리스 다 타마디 아니 라바 시럽게 라바디 인도 잠베 시럽게 라바디기 다 가르치고 할수도 아란주다 루제 타르도가 다 나바산지 지는 루제 타르도보다 가르레스라고 오고요나 아니 단기 개월 도벨레도 아니 배버주 소만나 신시 개원도 얘기 교디 아니 아란주기다 나 등신당 아니 더샤도 저기도 잠베 안 틴도베 쳐도 아니 아란주 딱갈리 잡고요 어딘데 딜라 라바 시럽게 라바 매베이나 아니 아란주 등진의 진당 모습이 로지 마게게 바도 아니 고 당매 가서 당매 매버수 다도 준비 등진 매버수 요모 매버수 자와 니네 매버수 투에 매버 인도 잠베 아니 제상가 산제 좀 된디기 나도 싫어닝 뭐 아주 되만나시 아니 뒤숨도 슈베 아니 산제 탐제기 용 아마존 로버트 텔레데니 계고 요르 산제 이내레 아니 하바도 chanju sembaji inere 아니 대배상제 마음배선 다다서 컨디션 외에는 딜든 계곡으로서 용침을 싫어지 바로 치바 세대니 세상과 내가 전부 쉬지 차원도 전배 타만 룹자 가르쳐드렸어도 개와 노백 쳐도 제 세대 우리 내가 전부 다 개와 노의 세대 저 타바 톱 세대 찍어버다
So here so here is sort of bringing so that sort of this understanding this wish to be the possibility of being liberated from these continual rebirths which have a basis in suffering, and then for Nagarjuna says in the Precious Garden, exert yourself in order to bring an end to the cycle of rebirth. So here in relation to this, in the Buddhist sort of canon, we have the three baskets or three pitakas that we can say here in this context the trainings, the basket of the trainings in ethical discipline, the basket of the trainings in concentration, and the basket of the trainings in wisdom. And so, in terms of the first one, the trainings in the sort of pitak of the teachings on the trainings in ethical discipline, then here the main sort of purpose is in maintaining very pure ethical conduct in order to continually be able to achieve a good physical support, so that we can engage in sort of meaningful activities. So, if we sort of having that being continuously able to be able to achieve a good birth, a good physical support certainly helps in being able to, in this sort of project of being able to continuously work towards liberation and enlightenment. The second training, the basket of teachings on the trainings in concentration, a sort of we may actually achieve a precious human rebirth, but also without a strong training in concentration, it's very difficult for us to again to not have distraction and to make and it's very difficult for us to fully make our lives fill our lives with meaningful things. So the concentration helps us to develop a stable mind as sort of paths and practices and methods in order to help us develop a stable mind in order to again engage in meaningful activities. And then the third, the basket of teachings on the training in wisdom. And here, the sort of, again, the sort of, what is it that we really wishing to accomplish? What is the thing that what is the purpose, the sort of main aim or accomplishment that we're trying to achieve? And that, of course, is here, as mentioned in the text, bringing an end to the cycle of rebirth and stopping the causes of rebirth. So therefore, this involves us being able to counteract and eliminate the self-grasping and attachment, which together cause that continual process of rebirth. And so we need to, it's extremely important also to make great effort in developing wisdom. So particularly developing the wisdom, which is the form of wisdom which is a direct, which is in direct opposition to the mind of self-grasping, which without and the mental afflictions, without which we can't do anything. So here we need. So this connects with the verses in the Perfection of Wisdom. Within the Heart Sutra, where it talks about the Buddhas, the mother of the Buddhas of the three times, the perfection of wisdom, and how we need that in order to help liberate us from the cycle of rebirth.
다 딘데진도 딘데기 토르야 아주 슈지 잡아라서나 신에 아니 간이 간데지 중보이나야 디 코웨 주니레 슬람 dom청부지 답제 다디 만트라선로 디 코웨 주니레스 다 딜레마징 타르마토나 다가라나 데야레스 데네직 타레야직 중보이나 지마롱 냐베 삼로디 깨어 갑라 아니 랑싱기 딜레 탄데기 삼바디 레온데 신이 다 디기 땡닝기 최디 가르레샤 세두점베 아니 신이 제주 제원도 가상 공부루루기 직제도 충분한 시제 제상가 아니 산제 좀된 디기 다도 점베 등진 뒤에 채도 아니 리바 송구도 디니 권한에 겹수 생긴 인스 딩에게 다 겹이 세제 공부루루기 가상 직제 주바 당보도 당이바 강시 리바 덴베 시 디니 권한 겹수 진세 디니 셈나로 레온도 점베 말하는 좀 수직이 잠들 체내를 맞체네 랑신기 잠들 따디 지 강에 라마지기 마 숭부 레드체바 잠마이 바 셈딩네 렙다 덴제 질레 차비 쇼들라 신에 아주 지기 다음에게 남샤 년바다 퇴바다 삼바다 공바다죠 제원도 점에 엔가로 진행하는 주 생그 수르지게 나로라 아니 예신 심진 탐지기 돈달라 디리지 쳇투나냐베 아니 뽑아지리다 디년도다 랑제줄래 용거 다이나양 정부셰베이나 닝지기 슈디 쳇마다나 다 가산디 디나로 송분다시 균제명아 둥기 좀 송송하데 나노라 균제명아 둥기 좀 간에 아니 슈디 양네 양도 드바마 쳇베이나 아니 셈젠테다 탐지 이두공와 제시 방법 주주제바 로샤베이네 팔레바 담아 베나 보고 춘춘 베 춘니베 쇼지게 베 차도 진베네 아마 되게 보고 들려 땅부터 보나 시체체 된지기 영해도 가르쳐나 아마 되게 보고도 통한데 이두공와 신도 이두공와 녀급에 정습 이 쿠유 용조 보고들 감블린 지기요 이나야 소소 아마 되게 춘에 랑들 땅부터 봐 교양 가수 지역에는 들려 땅부터 돼 가르쳐 버서도 아마들라디 신도 이도 공회 로시게 차버 덴리징아라는 소리죠 제베이나 아니 신에 다 심전 탐지기 된도 가르치기 슬랍도 잠베 다 크도 랍네르다 다디 망볼라 뭐 크도 랍샤베이나 춘이 깔레 마카베 토네 심슈 덴리지 마차베 거네 애니에 심진기 된셰베 대토베기 꾸지두고 인스 꾸지두고 수구지 아주 단다디 라케메도 삼로레 다 류가 예숨 간데지네 싸와지 루나마도 패마송 세두참베 신에네 상제주 고방 세네데 계제지 마시 라시케지 디마총베이나 아란주기 심슈이네레 아니 남주이네레 가리이네 당기요 말바 어디인데 상제주 꾸지 루나마도 루마송 세게 삼로데다 딜레온데 아니 신에 디 용약이 체도 셈미양 양도 드브르 체야기 아니 담아들라 로종스 또 딜레로 탄탄하고 좋지.
And so this very central point that it's very important to that we have to have this that we have to develop this wisdom which lies in direct counterpoint. It apprehends its object in exactly directly the opposite way the self-grasping does. So the wisdom understanding the true nature of things, and without that, there's not very much hope to be able to. There's no hope to be able to destroy our self-grasping of the afflictions, and so using that, we then sort of developing these three trainings. Then we sort of so we also have to understand that until I'm liberated from these, that this is how things are going to be within samsara. Whatever happens to us, we have to sort of in some way have a little bit relaxed mind in the sense of this is the nature of samsara. These things are going to happen, and therefore we, understanding that that's how it'll be until we are liberated. Then we develop a stronger wish for liberation, and then we search for for some kind of teaching or advice that will help us to be liberated from those states. And so, as we mentioned on the first day in the verse where it says that I don't take sides with the Buddhas, but I hold as a teaching, or we could say I take as a refuge, the ones who speak words which are endowed with reason. So so particularly this is the words of the person who spoke the words, or gave the teachings on how to tame and the reasons and methods for us to tame our self-grasping. So then we take that one as a refuge, and that becomes a kind of if we really hold that context in our mind, then naturally that becomes a kind of natural refuge. And so this refuge is sort of very natural and comes from very, very deep within inside, instead of just a form of refuge perhaps when we come into direct contact with a master or guru and there's some feeling. This kind of refuge is very natural and deep refuge coming from within. And then we sort of contemplate, so training ourselves in hearing, contemplating, and meditation, the three trainings. And then the three aspects of training is hearing, contemplation, and meditation, and then really having that sense that we wish to not do this not for ourselves but for all beings, to be able to help all beings in some way. But even the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, they have these kinds of minds of the wish to help beings. But then we need to sort of further strengthen our compassion, as we mentioned yesterday in the teaching about the 7-point cause and effect instruction on bodhicitta, and how and developing. To continue to develop our compassion and eventually our bodhicitta. And we need to have this real sense of not ever sort of giving up on or letting go of any of the sentient beings, so that it's not just a mind like we ordinarily have of I wish to care or I wish to cherish. We care or cherish for certain beings or have a feeling. It's really the sense that we really cannot let go of any sentient being, and this could be similar to how there may be a child who lives in a sort of village or town who's really a very bad child, very bad behavior, and all of the sort of neighbors and the society around her complain about that child, and yet the mother, because she sees her child in such an affectionate and caring, close way, just can't give up on the child, even though everybody else is sort of complaining and kind of given up on them. And so we have to have this real sense of closeness, affection, and sort of cherishing mind for all beings who are in the same state as us, as mentioned. And therefore, we sort of look then to think, well, this body and sort of mind, however maybe courageous we are, how intelligent we are, how hardworking we are, there's only so much that we are able to do, and then we must look for, in order to be able to help beings. It's not who we currently are, our intelligence, our wisdom, etc., our body. We're not able to do that much to help other beings. So then we look for a form of existence or body that can do all of those things, and therefore we look to the state of Buddhahood as a way to be able to and be able to achieve these aims that we've set, that we wish to accomplish. And so in that, and then this connects to the instructions that we've been talking about here in the text on the instructions of mind training.
다 계산기 참되네 직대비나 다 전주 심 템버 쳐야지 아니 견제 맹아 된게 좀 받지 더 잡체 다 되네 양도 아니 민기주니 방자시 다도 태버 템버 차스 초당 아제 솨자시 멤버 샘당 템버 차스 또 디나로니 토나셰고 지디 민기주디 방구리스 다디 아란주 장래 뉴욕 현在뉴욕 봐 다도 태버 템버 차세죠 디버루들 태버 템버 차세죠 민기주디 고아직려야 민기주디 용을 땅바이나 아니 태버 템버 루레에서도 고아직len 추요래 남샤준도 민기주디 마도 우스간 디샤샤도 템베 아니 고 가로진이 고 전도 정신 내용으로 봐 민기주기 삼로들 내용이요 때 아니 고 포커스드 포스 시부체네 가 연도 템베 수인의 진이로 오면 봐 제정가 고 정신기 민기주디 방바티기 아줄을 가르고 오르는 셈라 대화지다 셈라 이 대화 대바지고 요레스 대바 때문에 자스 되네 초당아지 솨자시 멤버sem다 된바죠 초와당아지로 소바데 가르치나 nga 세두 점베시고 지금 아마도 메신 로데비는 아지 디기요 바스 디기 만내메 제도 강토두기 멤버데 셈 마테즈 토디 아니 카테들 마오레 셈데 마와낸 샤비나 아니 닝지게와 대바게와 용조게 온도 담베 멤버sem다 된바 차스 멤버 디레마도 지기시 멤버스들 선배 당아 개개 신기메 아 튜니 중기메 세도 통중 제배 자원이 느껴져 말해 멤버섬다 댐버차 아니 로버 초와 초차신 최규 초와 초와자 다디가 주 단다 파라멘라 게세 그래서 파라멘의 게임을 봐. 그봐? 원래는 디나 신치 최초야 초와차스 당한 초와 계단디 아니 아주 루다 덤베토네 초와 계고 그래서 상승 탐지 방자신 시두점배 상승 시두점배 균형어부터 저 방걸 크도 샤스 깨지면체 균형롱주를 때니 아니 랑신기 셈디 아니 착배 초를 저치 아니 뭐디오 마르망로나 디 상승도 좀 아샤 그랬어 아니 대조 샤바 되게 초 가를렌 토바지 그것은 파괴 노르기 gem을 차스 파괴 노르 게스 노르 든시 월직 송도 디베진디 맨로성 걸 타도 주고요만 파괴 노르기 gem을 차스 되게 원래 파괴 노르 든지 송거지 디베진 맨로성도 다디 월지 되게 장에 월 주고이
And so here, sort of now connecting all of this with the, with the mind training text that we've been studying, that of the Bodhisattva Garland of Jewels. And here, yesterday, we talked about, in verse 5, about in the first two lines of verse, last lines of verse 4, and the first two lines of verse 5, where we talked about connecting that with the 7 points, cause and effect instruction on developing bodhicitta. And then in the third line of verse 5, it says, relinquish the 10 negative actions. And the last line says, verse 5, and always reinforce your faith. So in terms of relinquishing the 10 negative actions, I mean, the main thing is just for us to really understand how destructive these 10 negative actions are, both for ourselves and also for others around us, and they're destructive for both ourselves and others. So therefore, but here it says, it sort of draws a connection between relinquishing the 10 negative actions and always reinforcing your faith. So a little bit sort of trying to draw that connection between how, if we're able to, the main thing here is to understand that if we relinquish the 10 negative actions, then there's a sense of peace, a sort of spaciousness in our mind. And then we have the faith that understands that the sort of connection between relinquishing and negative actions, and then also the arisal of sort of obviously virtue, but sort of happiness and peace in our minds. So developing that sort of the faith in that connection. And then in the start of verse 6, it says, destroy anger and conceit and be endowed with humility. And here, here it's sort of really the sense of certainly anger and conceit, particularly conceit, is to think that, I'm the only one who's important. It's just about me. I'm the only one who really matters. And to try to reduce and suppress that. And one of the ways to do that is to be endowed with humility, which is to sort of hear, not in that sense of thinking I'm no good, I'm useless, I'm hopeless, not in that sense of looking down on ourselves, but having, it literally says, having the mind where we are lower, it literally means that, membesem. And it's, so not having that, but just thinking, reducing that mind which thinks that I am, taking a sort of lower seat, thinking that I'm not as important as I used to think I am, and having sort of compassion for others on this. So it's not looking down on ourselves. And in the 8 branches of the Arya paths, there's the what we call here now in the second lines of verse 6, where it says relinquish wrong livelihood and be sustained by ethical livelihood. So that's part of the the 8 branches of the noble paths. And then in the first 2 lines of verse 7, it says, "Forsake material possessions and embellish yourself with the wealth of the noble ones." Here, this doesn't mean getting rid of all your possessions. It doesn't. It's not saying that. But what it is saying is being able to get rid of all of our attachment and clinging to things and not being so caught up and involved in the material possessions. And then embellish yourself with the wealth of the noble ones will connect to a part of the text later on where it talks about the 7 jewels, the garland of jewels of the Bodhisattvas.
다때네 둔지 탐제 방자신 아니 고발라네 네버 차스 답든지기 아란즈기 민기위 초스네다 뇽몬기위 다 줄로게 뇽몬기위 줄은 로킹기 아니 오버직 단단 저기 나로야 아니 디 뇽몬 세야디 사바시고 사바 아니 최근에 인베 이나양 뇽몬기에 규질라야 야 사체스 명다고도 봐 제장가 빼나 등아란주 듄의 잘라간 지유위나야 그래서 정말 사체스 아란주 차단계에서 쪼지 가려서는 수구들이 진짜 니가 사체스 대운도 좀 배추 간리지 아란주 단다 뇽몬기스기 미바 뇽몬기스기 땡지라운도 좀 그래서 정말 사체스요 또 좀 딜을 아니 게 롱지기면서 좀 뭐를 롱지기면서요 말에 차단계스기 시딩아 롱지기면서 비어지용도 봐 제단고 롱 코랑기 베낭아란주 지기 칼라이네리 커피네리 피자이네리 저 가보이는 저때 롱도 받지 이네 딜때니 차받게 주면서 디 담자를 드려도 제장가 단다 딘나시 딘나로를 냠내 제부가버야 로베 초와당 아니 콘로당 아jel로 소바트 자탐제 계색이 시대당 타랑 부디기스 안 파베 노르지 잼벌 차스 제야 타랑 지고 지고다야 로아케 믹세시 지고 말해 제장가 파베 노르지 잼벌 차스 다테네 디디지기 약보질 파베기 노르데 추렌투야 타민 바세오르베다 뇽몬계색이 시계색이 최도저 타랑으로 땅야라야 아니 알 뒤져지고도스 뒤져 간대지고서도 아니 뇽몬계색이 시대다 타랑 땅치 아니 셈는 정다라고 제 고급지라고 딜려야 신의 곰발라네 네버차스 곰바스 타랑 부치 뇽몬계색이 시대 타랑 부치 되긴스 곰발라네 네버차 저런 공부세도 디르다. 최외 측난 방자신. 최외 측난 방자신서 다 디르지 대비 갑라야. 계절다면에 녀야, 셰야. 도 상황 파샤. 되네 따도 안에 동바샤스. 지난에 디 알야 민교에 나로 민교에 시 파송도 좀be 망초디 나가는 시기요라. 나가 난도네 배나 지기 주 타마 직수 아 체스지 유베 나노네 망쉐디 뒤즈드 망쉐디 악치를 루이도 선배 고 쇼메주 시헬 루이도 선배 제베스나 방자신스 안 따도 안 동바 차스지 당 아된 따오적인 소리 샴바도 도슬랄 하도 아체디 칼 카보이도 근데 아체 따오적인
And so here here the sort of in terms of how the mental afflictions arise, then in the Abhidharma it says that it's this sort of mainly it describes what is or a description or a presentation of what is contaminated, something which is contaminated, and literally gives the definition that something is contaminated is something which causes the mental afflictions to arise or increase. And this is something contained in the sort of Abhidharma literature. So if something gives rise to the mental afflictions, then it is something which is contaminated. So we can see very clearly examples of this, for instance, of our strong clinging to our body, our physical bodies. Then this causes the sort of contamination of the mental afflictions arising, and so this anything which is a basis or sort of focus. A focus or basis which then causes the arisal or the increase of the mental afflictions, we can consider to be contaminated. And um, uh, so it's and therefore we need to um, these bases of we need to, and when it says talking about abandoning um, you know forsaking material possessions and embellishing ourselves with the wealth of the noble ones, here is sort of an uh, abandoning the sort of here the abandoning means to abandon the basis the basis from which the attachment and the anger, the other mental afflictions arise. So it's not talking about abandoning everything. It's okay to enjoy our the things of our lives, such as coffee or pizza, or these things can be enjoyed, but we should be very clear that I'm not getting attached. I'm not getting involved in the process of attachment to them. I'm not getting caught up in attachment in relation to them. And so, therefore, we have this sense of proper sort of almost like uh, here sort of the way in which we start to practice by distancing ourselves from these bases which cause us to get angry or to cause us to have strong attachment. And so um, here and then, so we sort of clothe ourselves with the wealth. It literally says to adorn ourselves with the wealth of the noble ones, which is the wisdom understanding these things. And so then the jewels of the will be spoken about later on in the text. But then in verse 7, lines 3 and 4, it talks about avoiding trifling distractions and residing in the solitude of the wilderness. And so here, this doesn't mean that we have to go off and live in a sort of remote place. What it's saying is that, avoiding getting caught up in these sort of meaningless distractions, and also getting ourselves further away from those bases, those things which are contaminated, which are the basis of the arisal of our attachment and anger. So it's keeping far away from those rather than sort of literally moving to a place of solitude. And then in the start of verse 8, it says, abandon the frivolous words, the first line. So, of course, this relates to particularly to the out of the 10 non-virtues, the 4 non-virtues of speech, such as lying, slander, harsh speech, and idle gossip. And actually, if we really look at our lives, we spend a lot of time out of the 10 non-virtuous actions. We can say that we spend a lot of time and effort engaged in these actions for speech, particularly sort of gossip and slander, these kind of things, particularly gossip, and these take up so much of our time. And so it says, abandon frivolous words and constantly guard your speech. So sort of very important to understand how we are getting away from these contaminated bases, which causes to attachment and anger, and then causes also to engage in these non-virtues. And so our practice is to start avoiding those.
타도 다한테는 제베스는 빠져 다나한도 왔어 캠보 라마 캠보 통비치 그베 림도 개발 찬스 간사 추기 미진의 라담부 유심진 됴비 주지 개발 찬스 다 라마다 캠보 다 지단다 개발 먹고 다 두저도 쉬모 와체 개치슈디 다 라마다 캠볼라 아니 지게 지게 라담부 유심진 라스 le thangbo wa sidu ja ta thamembe namba thonde ba kanshi chi la korangi tang di khadu shwe na 아니 타르발 잠비 최지 송겐지 타르발 잠비 최지 땡켄지라 아는 아주 똠베 두시게 고죠레스 아 똠베 두시 마제발라 거기 최대의 야보다 도대 세선을 샤샤베는 경소소로 봐. 다 다른 원에 전에 쿠란 드리지 지에 등아 소놈 전부 시부리 딘지기 최대 자 전부 등원에 잡아도 뺏겨와 상보 인세도 참배 제장각 딘디 띵킹기 강사대 자 전부 윤비 좀전디 최대 자 전부 인별 될때니 강사대 자 전부 인세고야 돼 투브라 어디 인도 잠배 고 랑싱기고 안주 남샤준도 라마데 자침부 시부리 가르전스나 라마데 명칭부도 라마데 follower망부도 라마데 최시에 개바도 라마데 밀 직딩이 도난도 좀 개바도 스티케지 말와 라마데 야고 시부지도 시도 잠배 라마텔레팀비 최대 자침부죠 통제 딘데 자침부 딘데디 아니 라마텔 때는 중앙인도 전배 라마데 거니 침부 라마데 자침부르셔 도스도고 유도 전배 라당부 semjen라 아니 템베 두셰디게고 요레스 두셰 가르게브레 세도 전배 산제 좀된디 거니 침부 인단디 다메를 전배 최대 송바 인도 전배 라마디기 다 송원도 전배 템베 두셰 계단 데려도다.
And so here in verses, the second two lines, the last two lines of verse 8, where it says, when you see your teachers and preceptors reverently generate the wish to serve, and then the first two lines of verse 9, where it says, towards wise beings with Dharma eyes and towards beginners on the path as well. So here, what's sort of important in terms of it mentions the sort of gurus and sort of the kempos, the masters or preceptors, and even also these beings with who are wise in the Dharma, but also toward beginners on the path as well. It very clearly states that. And so what it's trying to do is get us away from our sort of ordinary way of seeing and understanding that we sort of have reverence or respect and reverence for anyone who teaches something or explains something which leads us on to the path to liberation. And so it's but what's very important here is that generating that reverence for someone should not be done by thinking of someone who has a great name, they have many followers, they have a particularly good way of explaining things, and they seem to explain things sort of quite nicely, which fit quite nicely in with the kind of way of the world. These are not the sort of qualities that we're sort of looking for here. When it talks about the beings with wise beings with Dharma eyes, it's talking about this sort of great opportunity of meeting those who are teaching the profound Dharma. It's because of the Dharma that they're teaching that they became valuable or important, and so we revere them on the basis of that, not on the basis of their personality or character or name, etc., but on the basis of the Dharma that they're teaching, and that Dharma should be a Dharma that leads us on the path of liberation. And so that's so seeing the great seeing the qualities of the Dharma, whether it says here, whether it's in those who are steeped deeply in the Dharma, or it's those who are also beginners on the path. So it says to encourage us to have this perspective of kind of reverence and respect for those who sort of expound the Dharma. And this we can connect this with the way in which we is often said that the reason that the great masters say the reason I sort of pay homage to or respect the Buddha is because they talked about the topic of selflessness, and in the same way here we could say that we pay respect and we have respect and reverence for those who also talk about the teachings which can lead us on the path to liberation. So that's the last two verses of 8 and the first two verses of 9.
간사 제장디 나로려야 힌디선로데 간사 취기 미jen당 세들이 취기 미jen스도 좀 통남세 오르바 통남세도 대방어섬도 통아 세워라 대방어섬도 통외 아니 간사다 레 당보와 세도 좀베 동영어섬도 마토나야 튼지춘의 통도 좀베 레 당보외 심진 간제질이나야스 아니 먼저 덤베듯이 인세 디체 다 심진 탐지 통외 제 파마 부제 두시기 아니 디베 조업반자 신 계획신이 땜바차 심진 간다지 통배이나야 아니 랑즈 심진 단 샤차베 심진 수수 미진나는 수요나래 파이나래 마이나래 아니 차우다 참오다 간지지 유네 디다냠도 찍고 찍양지게 뒤시지 떼투도 떼투고면도 아니 정더치쇼스 뒤시지 안 디게베깔라 디베 조업반자 신스도 좀 딘디 삼로당데 베깔이야 아니 아주 마소는 인포메이션 다 멘탈롱녀라고 암저 나로라 다디 초요 말이 지지니냐고 망고 레원이 참으로 딘지 글랍제 담녀디다 타는 거 도고 요레스 디베 초 반제시 게웨신 남템버차 시두점베 게웨시 시두점베 오늘 디 파마 부지 뉴시기에기 아니 땡 단다 소소기다 베나 밑게 도우면도 파마 부지 뉴시기에 그 로봇 체킹기 아니 랍제 담녀기 게베신년도 저도 네버도 된고 저레스 다디 네버도 천주선배기 아니 저벌 쇼 되게다 아니 디기 초선도 년도 저 된고 저레스 제 어디르샤 게베신년 땜버샤 어디버도 찍진다.
Then we cover the last three. There are 5 lines in the 9th verse. So the last 3 lines of the 9th verse and the first 2 lines of the 10th. So it reads, recognize. Those with the Dharma eyes. In the verse line of verse 9. And the beginners on the path actually could also more refers to those with the Dharma eyes, that those are the ones who of the eyes which have seen the truth of reality directly. So those would be persons on the path of seeing. And then also we can connect the second line towards beginners on the path as well as those who haven't actually seen the emptiness, the nature of reality directly, but who have seen it, for instance, in with using sort of generic images and valid, inferential valid cognition of emptiness. So that also can be connected at that level, those on the paths of accumulation and preparation as well. Then in terms of the verses, the last 3 verses, lines of verse 9, recognize them as your spiritual teachers. In fact, when you see any sentient being, view them as your parent, your child, or your grandchild. And so here it's very important to have this trying to develop this sense of how we would perceive any sentient being as being our as the way we would perceive in this life our fathers or our mothers or our parents, our dear aunts or dear uncles, those in which we have a very positive and close connection with. We have tried to develop this kind of perspective or discrimination that we see them, all the sentient beings in this way, as being our parents, our children and our grandchildren, those who were very dear to us and close in relation to us. And that, and then in the first line of verse 10, where it says renounce negative friendships. So here, particularly what negative friendships means here is particularly those, because we get a lot of sort of stuff comes into us from different people, our thoughts, we get a lot of information from people, and the negative friendships would be those who are giving us information in discord with what is being said here, and then relying on the spiritual friends is to rely on those who teach about these topics, such as developing this close sense of connection, as though someone is our parent, our child, or our grandparent, and also those who teach us, teach about bodhicitta and these topics which connect. So.
당당 미디기 셈빵신스 강도 대월로 봐자 당와당 미디비 셈빵신스 다 지단에 당와스를 전에 컨트롤이 계절이 컨트롤 디 자와들이야 다들 계속 좀 쉬어라고 소문나시 이 미디와 수익현슈어스 이 미디와들이야 아니 답을 잡아야 되는 거죠. 세상 이 미디어디 게야디기 체도 아주 다 콘로 거뒤에 깨쳐줘요 말이야. 콘로 신이디 인포메이션 디마선에 당아주마선에 walkenon shirba walkenon sebati walkenon smarba walkenon shire ta chigi kuran torbi kapla tormurba dimado 원에 고 싸워를 야 클지 대원등 아주 통고요 말봐 제나신지 딘딘 커네 대기 삼로되기 딜라 이미 되와서 아주 이미 되와를 깨운등 아주 답고자고요레스 제정한테 이미 되와디 당와다 이미 되기 셈디 방고도 잠베 강도 대와로 차 세도 잠베 디 계시 직레온도 잠베 딜이 순체 오 딘타디 응고도다 예 딘데 삼당당지 예 다고 쉬우쉬우 잡은 것도다 예 취미 이직 남도 로쉬우쉬우 다 응고도다 어따팅 예 콘로지 줄레 예 사면 답고도다 시체 데네 데스타르는 줘야 지도 점베 강도 대워도 차스 디 초로 만들어 왔다라 대외 초로 그랬어 강란 차고 방자신 디너신 삼로당당 디너신게 착바로 속바 착바디 아주 대화를 세바 대외 줄 세바 내용도 잠베 오 당에 차과집이 줄 수치무로 다스는 차과집이 주되네 테스트 파 다른로 당고요레스 하바도 아니 차백을 내가 개치슈디 가지고 통구요 말에 개치슈디 그 차백을 가르치고요레스도 잠베 덴족이 마 테르투비아 지다 덴족이 모투네 테마토바다 마세 아니 타르베양 타르베 소전 접어쳤으나 타바 톰되기 삼로 하나 까르고 그랬어 다 커두셰베 드링 안 저기 담봉 고주기 까블이야 아니 그런 저다 미지나로다 나바산제베 최대 제지 개치슈를 가르쳐 버렸어도 깨와 까고 그랬어 델 잠베 최대 제거했어도 셈나로라 어레 삼상 요래데 이나양 아니 아주 로디 차베 초ල්판 로베인자 디 타르베 소제의 파지샤체 다딜 로아드에 단자와 타초자마 제정가 타르베 소전 제벌 지니디 가르르스도 세바 차고드리스
And so here in terms of the verse 10, so then it says, dispel hostility and unpleasantness and venture forth to where happiness lies. This is the second two lines of verse 10, line 3 and 4. And here is hostility here can be, mainly sort of connected with anger. And what we see is what really is the root of anger is a kind of sense of mental unhappiness, a sense of mental discomfort or unhappiness that then leads to us anger and then to hostility and unpleasantness. And this is something we really need to sort of this mental unhappiness before the anger and everything arises is something we really have the ability to sort of try and get our hands on and try to get a hold of and get under control. It's not like anger just arises out of nowhere. We don't sort of just suddenly explode with anger out of nowhere. Just as in the same way, a volcano doesn't just explode out of nowhere. We don't see the build up, the sort of further causes and conditions of the under the ground of what's going on before the volcano explodes. What we see is the volcano exploding, but we don't see the build up of the causes and conditions which cause that. And in the same way, our sense of mental sort of unease and mental unhappiness are what are really causing the build-up, which will eventually lead the cause, which would eventually lead us to anger. And so we need to be able to take hold of that and try to dispel that. And then, as it says, to venture forth to where happiness lies, is to sort of get ourselves away from those causes and conditions, understanding how that. We're under the power of we're sort of under the power of sort of misperceiving things, what's called inappropriate attention about the way that we're misperceiving things. We're under the see that we're under the power of this unhappiness, and we're planting the seeds eventually to lead us to states of unhappiness. So then the venture forth to where happiness lies is that sense of understanding, being careful and understanding this process, and not allowing ourselves to go under the power of to be drawn into those sort of negatively mental states of mind, which then will lead us further, and keeping away from the basis and situations which will cause that to happen to us. And then in start of verse 11, it says abandon attachment to all things. So this sense of getting far away from attachment, and it says abide free from desire. So it's difficult for us again to see clearly all the processes and the complications of attachment. Some of the difficulties and complications of attachment we can understand, but actually what is said is that attachment is something which cuts away all the causes of us being born in happy states, and it cuts this kind of seed or the potential or seed of liberation for us to be able to achieve liberation. So this life, if we talk about ourselves as being a Buddhist, then we have to understand that attachment, and we need to cut that chain of rebirth. Then we have to really understand the negative effects of attachment which prevent us from achieving liberation and achieving happy states.
Okay. 다 딘지 강도 대외 최통화서 다 딘지기 덴주기 덴주 개버치베 주 아니 알아는다 개와줄 소베 아니 추름드죠 아니 알아는 뒤쳐서 통화다 대를 따도 배버 차스도 아니 그뒤니 추름 송마를 시우지 가디니 메디 가르스나 따도 대와 된뒤기 삼로 숙청부 여든이 치레스 대야 가르서 그래 착백이 줘서 롬몰롱아 치지 아니 강도도 추름을 납드니디 아니 대외처 강도 대외처 통화 대내 따도 배버 차스 라바 추름을 배버 차스 해서지 통말 잠바 강인바 당보티니 룹자디 대단한 군대체 신도니가 주민주 간대지 냠낸 간대지기 제베이나 아니 녀라 수수수 슈 거리다고 있는 등고조마도 야 참례지기 아주마 손에 다 지가서 그래 드링디시라디 야고지 마셔나 얀디야 라마 샴바지 송주 죽니 얀디 냠네데 오즈메드로섬 딜레 테스트체 피게 토스토스 아니 춘이 또바제메 순도 차나 야고요 말이스 니 파제 수치 니가 뭐루니 차이 니가 요르다스 데인도 잠베 단다 아란주 온도 닐레르 잠베 온도다 닐레 잠베기 최 컨디지 힘비나야 아니 베나 라바 추름게 라바 시르송 세르 잠베 추름게 라바디 베트 카투이네다 데 아란주 슈 답토바지 오레스 다 지금 커도를 질라베나 가수 지금 이 청부지 캐베이나야 오기 라바 추중기 라바디 슈자부레 생겨서 지금 담아주 튕고도가 제정가 조지 반대 아디샤 별이야 송주 야가로 송주 난단다 별 송주는 또도 교화줘요 레스고 리서치 진행 속에 제정가 별 배원도 준비 아니 가투기네 조지 콘도 미망길이야 송주 남백가라 렌데 짱냥 송등이지 레던 집에 남자 짱냥 소되죠 추림 송구래 제 우두견등이 주요레스 야가리양 배전 전주신비게 담아로 쏘바다 야 고지 체매기 댄주다 더 토르베 창슈베인도야 뒤뚱기서 봐 제장가 라마 렌제바 지지 천수야 되는 중으로 봐 별라 제장 어디는 조지기 단다디 랍제디디 전수민의 위청한 디양 디나로를 가르송도 쓰도 좀 알아서 컨디지 임베이나 녀려야 다 라바 추중게 라바디 시르송 도바지고 그래서도 기부 중우 ring 전부 숨게 나로네 아니 기부 중우 쇼거디 아주 녀디 다고야 도바지고 그러다스 디가 또 랍제 능이 없으면 좋아 어디 봐두르셔
And then, so looking at the second, the verse lines 3 and 4 of verse 11, where it says, "Attachment fails to bring even the higher realms. In fact, it kills the true life of liberation." So that's sort of connected with what we were talking about just earlier. That attachment sort of will stop us from attaining even the sort of higher states of rebirth in samsara, and totally cuts off the life of the possibility in life of liberation. And then in verse 12, it says, "When you encounter the causes of happiness, in these always persevere." So here, very much understanding that the causes of happiness and the causes of the higher states of rebirth and eventually, of course, the causes of true liberation are the conduct of ethical discipline and the practice of the 10 virtuous actions. So here, the causes of happiness particularly refers to the causes of permanent happiness. So and so making sure that understanding how the negative effects of the attachment, and then practicing ethical discipline and a conduct which is persevering in this conduct which keeps us away from the negative effects of attachments, and also yes, so the negative effects of attachment. And then is a very important advice to us about how to sort of engage properly with the Dharma, where it says, "Whichever task you take up first, address this task primarily. In this way, you ensure the success of both tasks, where you otherwise you accomplish neither." So this is a very important piece of advice. We do tend to sort of do things in a kind of haphazard sort of patchwork way, where we take up a particular kind of practice. It may be a particular teacher or just a particular practice, and then we put a little bit of effort into it, and then we feel, oh, that didn't really go, that after a while we feel that didn't really go so well, and we switch to doing another kind of practice, or could be another kind of teacher or practice, and we sort of move around and don't stay with one particular practice in for an extended period of time, and therefore we end up not being able to achieve any of these things. So particularly this talks about, Rinpoche just clarified there, what this particularly talks about the habit of, when it says, "Whatever task you take up first, address this task primarily," is this habit of how we start something, and then without bringing that to any kind of completion, we then engage in another activity, and then without completing that, we engage in another activity. So particularly this habit of doing that in general, and then particularly that habit within our Dharma practice of not, taking so particular Dharma practices that we're doing, that we don't make them complete and then move on to doing something else. And the effect of this is that neither of the, as it says in this way, you ensure neither of them will be accomplished if you do this in this way. But what we're aiming to do is to first of all attain rebirth in higher sort of positive states of rebirth, and then eventually to achieve definite release from samsara. So therefore we need a sort of continuity, and we also need this sort of concentration and wisdom in order to help us to be able to do that. This is a great aim, but great aims always need to be underpinned with these forms of great aim always need to be underpinned with a very strong basis of ethical discipline. And so it's interesting that Atiśa had very different. The researchers have found that Atiśa had a very different teaching style when he was teaching in India compared to that of teaching in Tibet. When he was teaching in Tibet, he spoke so much about ethical discipline, and particularly he spoke about the law of karmic cause and effect. Whereas in India, he tended to give instructions more on topics such as the instructions on bodhicitta and the four immeasurables, all these different kinds of topic. And so actually he was given, Lama Atiśa was given the name of cause and effect Lama, or cause and effect guru, in Tibet, because he spoke so much about ethical discipline and cause and effect. And so this also, bringing in the context of the three scopes of the beings here in this text is here in this particular part we're talking about particularly about the training in ethical discipline in order to achieve higher states of rebirth, which is sort of connected with the lower scope. But we have to understand that lower scope, the strong practice in that lower scope, is something which underpins all of the three other, the middling and the higher scopes. And this training is crucial for those other scopes.
딕비기 레 칸디치 닝 책메 세 삼로질레 딕벌 수나치 딕 따도 딕라 가젤베스 딕버체알 수나치 개와체알 삼로 슈침볼레 강도 토비 셈 중체 대쟁아제 짜셔시 디둥아제 라지요 말이야 야 딕버 지금에 개와치니 시도 잠베 양고 수림 넘버 타고 싶어 손들도 잠베 양 뽑아 떼슬리고 놓고 아제 레옹을 봐 내가 타와야고 싶지 알라마야고 싶지 수림 싶어 손고요세 아 이거 아제 스타일이죠 봐 데네레도 잠베 양 라면 담아 탱고다스 라면 담아 쳐버차스 아니 제단데 가르치는 shum 라면 담아 딘제기 라면 담아 다지기 남셔준도 랑기 줄라 딱받쳐버렸어 라메기 양내도 숨는 신체제 다제 양내도 체 아니 준비 셈니 중외제 셈지 승려 되어서 야셈 shum지 당아 주림 나바타고 시손 데버레데야 지기도 니도 생아 녀몽비 상완전레스야 셈 shum니 대학해요 말다스 데려양 셈 지가서고리 아주 캥바디마 까차바다 셈 shum니 대에 계제 말에 디 강라양교 아니 nembe nyamne che yodo zambe ani simju singde de bar chigris ani simju sing de dang de kharresena ani niga tongba ni do goms 강도 차당 요 중지 규모 아니 주버신도 다 되는가 치슈디 저장아 라바 추중게 라바 시르송베 땡도 아니 신행을 안줘 다 가르쳐 버렸어요 아니 기부등기 초거다 다 내가 내배 답지 아니 기부등기 초거다 나로라 아니 간 양내 양동 알제기 아니 추중 야고 예배 띵도 아니 알제디 마자고도 잠배 알제디 뭐 시부주도 잠배 알제는 게 토시데 당신들이 아니 당신들 고념에 체도 아니 동반이 공부를 해서 다들 랍자체 당조대 참대 때대 야고질레스 이 내가 전부 인도대 참대 샤 다들 잡산 당가 줘체 까마 가지래 주주 체가를 봤던 거 주주 체가 주던 거 샤. 야용 그상견이 저들은 체라요 뭐래 주주 중이다 까마 정화 봐도 저들은 체 되네 니고 칼라 차잖아니 슝 차단지 조조시.
So we'll when we finish this bit, I'll stop here and we'll take a break, and then we'll do some question and answer, and then we'll finish the text in the afternoon. So here, then verse 13. Since you take no pleasure in negative deeds when a thought of self-importance arises. So here, when we do have a very strong practice of ethical discipline and really have cultivated that strong ethical discipline, and we sort of had this sense that I'm not going to get involved in any kind of negativity or uh, 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 then we what can happen to us is that so we say it says since you take no pleasure in negative deeds, so we really have that sense of ethical discipline and control, ethical control, where we're not going to get involved in anything which is negative or harmful. But then it's possible that on the basis of that competency, we could we can have a sort of confidence, but then that can lead into a kind of strong pride about, oh, I don't do anything that's negative. I have very pure ethical conduct. I'm a fully ordained monk holding the fully ordained vows. It is possible for this to spill over into a kind of pride, and so then. What Atiśa recommends to us is to at that instant, deflate your pride and recall your teacher's instructions. So bringing to mind the instructions which, and whether the guru instructs us, tame your own, take responsibility for your own mind, your way of thinking, tame your continuum. And so bringing these instructions to mind and understanding, the recognizing we become proud and understanding that, and trying to reduce that by using our teacher's instructions. And then also, and that's so sort of bringing us down when we become too proud or inflated with ourselves. But then in verse 14, it says that also the opposite side of that, when discouraged thoughts arise, uplift your mind. And so it's also possible that we get despondent about our practice and things in life. And so we should sort of have this sense of although I'm under the power of the mental afflictions, it's okay. And the way to sort of lift up our minds, particularly in this way, so to get us out of our discouraged thoughts and despondent way of thinking, is to we need something which a practice which will lift up our mind. So here, what Atiśa said to us is, uplift your mind and meditate on the emptiness of both. When objects of attraction or aversion appear, view them as you would illusions and apparitions. So here, although we use the sort of understanding of the nature of reality, of emptiness, in order to lift up our minds, and here we see this sort of flow of where we may have a strong ethical discipline and even a strong concentration, developing strong concentration on the basis of our good ethical discipline, and that sort of is still in the context of the lower scope. But here we start to talk about bringing in the wisdom that understands emptiness and cultivating the understanding of emptiness, and that helps us to then that connects with the context of a being of the middle scope, and since pride, the greatest extension of pride would actually be self-grasping. Self-grasping is the kind of highest form of pride. Then here, what Atiśa is doing is giving us some tools to reduce our pride, as was mentioned in verse 13, which is that of the meditating on the wisdom of so in fact, we have to, so whether we're actually sort of despondent and discouraged, or whether we're overinflated of ourselves and proud, both these times we view objects of attraction or aversion when they appear, we view them as illusions. So we also use emptiness to control both of those. So we'll stop here now. We'll take a 30-minute break. We'll do question and answer after the break until about 12 o'clock Israel time. And then we will finish the text in the afternoon session.
Yes. Yeah.